Do you think using random tables in D&D makes the game better or worse? Let's talk about that today on episode 3 of D&D PowerPoints. Hi, my name is Mark, and I've been writing and running adventures for over 40 years now. I also make music and write modules. You can find me online at coolnerdmark.com. In 40 years, I've rolled dice on a lot of random tables. Today, we're going to talk about how to make those tables more interesting at your table. D&D loves random tables. There are tables for wandering monsters. There are treasure tables. There are tables for spell effects. There are even tables to predict the weather. Random tables have been with Dungeons & Dragons since the original 1974 edition. Here you can see a random table for determining magic and maps that you might find in a treasure hoard. And this goes back to book 2 of that original white box set. For me, though, this was the book where I first got introduced to the random tables in Dungeons & Dragons. And oh, were there a lot of them in this 1979 hardback. There were encounter tables, treasure tables, and tables for starting age, height, and weight. There was even an entire random dungeon generator where you could play D&D by yourself if you had nothing else to do on a Friday night. But out of all the tables in this book, my pick for the most ridiculous has to be a subtable of the City Encounters table, the Random Harlot table. Yes, there really was a Random Harlot table. No, I never used it. 5th edition D&D has its share of random tables as well. The 2024 Dungeon Master's Guide has random tables of names, adventure ideas, chase complications, and the 2014 edition has even more tables, including random dungeon generation tables that kind of harken back to that first edition experience of playing D&D by yourself. It's expanded NPC and encounter tables, but it loses out versus the 2024 edition because it has much smaller print. And you know, if you're old enough to say that your first experience playing Dungeons & Dragons was using books that had TSR on the cover, you probably need the larger print. So now I'm going to talk about the things that you should and shouldn't do when you're using random tables in your games. First of all, unless you're playing by yourself, don't randomly generate an entire adventure. People come to the table to play with a group and have a good time with their friends, not to do something that was generated by dice or definitely not generated by ChatGPT. Don't use every result you roll. Think about whether or not the result you roll makes sense, and feel free to re-roll it if it doesn't fit the game. Don't spend a lot of time rolling on tables in the middle of a game. I definitely recommend that you do as much of your random table rolling in advance, although there are some exceptions. A few tips for using random tables. Have a few random tables handy for when your players do things that are unexpected. They're great for when you have to improvise. Scan, photocopy, or electronically compile several tables onto one page, or purchase a DM screen that already does that for you. When you can, definitely roll on treasure and monster tables between games instead of in the middle of a game. And when you do roll with advantage to save time. Roll twice and use the result that you like better. Although there are plenty of published tables and books that are out there, you might want to sometimes build your own. GM-built encounter tables can be a lot more interesting sometimes. You might want to build your own treasure tables, or create tables just to add flavor to a game. You might want to build weather tables that are custom for your setting, especially if you have a setting with unusual weather. In the last episode, I talked about using active hazards as a way to add excitement to a room or an encounter. And having an active hazard with a random table adds an extra layer of chaos, because you don't always know what a volcano or a brush fire or a angry mob might do at any given moment. A word of caution about creating your own tables. It's important to think about the math behind different combination of dice. You have to consider the distribution, and this was something I learned from Gary Gygax. when you roll 1 to 10 or roll 1 to 20, you have an equal chance of rolling any given number. So a table that goes from 1 to 20, you have an equal chance of rolling a 1 as you do rolling a 20, though it doesn't really seem that way sometimes. If you're rolling multiple dice, like 2d6 or 3d6, the distribution looks more like this bell curve here. And you can use that to your advantage. There is more of a chance, a higher probability that you roll an 11 or 12 than rolling a 3 or an 18. So when you're designing a table like that, you want to make the lowest and the highest numbers your most remarkable, your rarest results, and your more common results sit there in the center. Remember, in D&D, the basic philosophy is built off of the idea that high is good and low is bad. So if I'm making a random table like this, I might put more common results in the middle, the bad stuff at the bottom that could happen, and the good stuff at the top. Use your own experience and research whenever you're deciding what to put on your random tables. Think about, if I'm making a random table about what could happen during an open mic performance, and I like to go to open mic and perform guitar, I might think about, okay, what happens most of the time? What could be the worst thing that could happen? And what could be a really good thing that happen? Well, most of the time at open mic, people clap politely and go about their business of enjoying their food and drink. Every once in a while, it goes very badly, and you could break a string, or your voice could crack, or the microphones would stop working. And on the good side, you could have a great turnout and thunderous applause, and maybe someone comes up and asks you to buy a CD. So these are things that I think of when I'm performing, and I've had all of these things happen to me before. But if I was designing a table like that for, say, a bard in D&D, I would draw upon that experience. And if it was something I was not experienced in, I could do a little bit of research and find out some possibilities there. I want to share with you a random table that I created for a game recently called Rats on the Farm. This is a game that I'll be publishing next month online and in print form. And so that'll be out March 2026. And in this game, you are investigating a farm where some giant rats have infested a grain silo, and they are also have been mutated by magic and radiation. So on this table, you have a column for the D10 roll, the description, and the game effect according to the 2024 5e rules. So if you roll a 1, the rat is nauseated and will retch on the nearest target, and they'll have to make a con save or be poisoned. If they roll a 2, they pass some gas, and you have to make a con save, or in an area, or be incapacitated, not even able to act. If you roll a 3, the rat is intoxicated because it swallowed some fermented grain, and it kind of acts a little drunk. If you roll a 4, the rat is jacked and has increased protein and becomes stronger. Rolling a 5, the rat or rats, their stomach is rumbling, and it interferes with concentration for spellcasters. If you roll a 6, the rat literally gets so full he splits into 2, and this is due to the effect of the radiation that they've been infected by. If you roll a 7, the rat has some acid reflux, so they actually will do acid damage when they bite. If you roll an 8, the rat is sluggish and is so gored that it acts slower and has exhaustion. If you roll a 9, his senses are dulled and they can hardly see. They're not completely blinded, but close to it. And if they roll a 10, you have a goldfish effect, which means the rat actually grows all the way to medium size, as large as a dog. So as you can see, not all of the effects are a disadvantage for the rats. Some of them are advantages, and it just adds a layer of chaos. And I just had a lot of fun running this. And there can be up to like 6 rats, depending on how players there are, how many players you have in this encounter. And I wrote it so that it only affects the rats that the GM feels irrelevant in that particular round of combat. Well, that's it for this week. Hope you have fun rolling on random tables. Next week, we're going to talk about why does D&D have so many boring minions.
I wish I could find a better henchman. Red Dog. Luminous beings are we, not this crew.